Yeah, you got a dry cat.
I got a dry cat. Yeah, you want to go anywhere with that fucking joke, asshole?
I actually don't, and believe me, I vetted it.
Because I thought it before, and I was like, you know, I'm not gonna.
No joke. I vetted it twice in my head. I was like, surely dry. I just threw up a two-sided balloons happened on my screen again. I swear to God, though, I vetted it twice and did not get there. I did not.
In 1996, Scholastic began publishing Animorphs. Over the next 6 years, Catherine Applegate and her husband, Michael Grant, under the pseudonym K.A. Applegate, produced 54 main series books, several spin-offs, and inspired a TV series, graphic novels, and a cult following. We can't tell you where we live. We can't even tell you our last names. But we can tell you our thoughts and feelings on this series, book by book. I'm Miranda.
I'm Eddie.
And I'm Chris.
And we are the Anidorks.
These may be kids' books, but we discuss dark themes and mature content. There may also be some explicit language. Listener discretion is advised.
Chapter 13. Jeremy and Ket Halpak are reunited in the cave. Gross. It's getting late. Gross. Tobias and Axe volunteer to guard the Hork-Bajir while everyone else heads home. Tobias and Axe watch. As the gang walks home, they discuss what to do with the only two free Hork-Bajir on Earth. That's so gross. And maybe
I said
anywhere.
giggity and you got on me. And now you're like...
I'm just reading what Eddie
Chris
wrote.
is on a real puritanical kick today.
Yeah, dude, I'm getting old fast. Rachel suggests taking them to the media. Then at least no one could deny there's an alien invasion. Cassie points out that the media might already be controlled by the Yeerks. Oh my God, poor kiddos. They could be delivering the Hork-Bajir right back into the enemy's hands. Is that worth the risk? Jakes asks...
It does say Jakes.
Both Jakes. What do you do with an endangered species? Cassie says that you provide a safe place and hope that they boink and make children. But then, where is that safe space? Tobias has an answer. A valley deep in the mountains where salad dressing comes from. They'll go there tomorrow. Tobias is privately troubled. Though, he's never been to Hidden Valley Ranch before. So how does he know that it exists?
What
Well, he knows what he likes on his carrots. You know?
Cat and Jara are, that is what they do. They're like, we need to start a business. We need to start supporting
Oh my God,
ourselves.
what is ranch? What are you saying? What are you saying they put in ranch?
Well, when a boy Hork-Bajir and a girl
Oh no, stop it. Stop it. Eddie, this is exactly
I knew it
what I'm
couldn't
talking
taste
about.
that good naturally.
Oh, shut up. It's perfectly natural.
Great on
and still
fries.
inappropriate. Oh my God. Yo, dude. Podcast over. We're done. We're donezo. It's over. It's been a good run. Thanks all. Made it to book 13. If you guessed book 13 in the chat, you're 100% correct.
Wait, so we get this moment at the beginning of the chapter where Jara and Ket are reunited. And,
Right.
you know, right away, Rachel, when she morphs into a Hork-Bajir, she goes into this, what we're calling a dominance ritual, right? But they can't hug. Later we see them holding
what they're
hands.
calling.
Later we see them holding hands. They can't hug. They can't have a little smooch.
Well, they
you know
say
how
that
phony
hugging
they
is.
are?
First of all, we saw them embrace earlier.
Yeah.
When they came out of the hole.
Good point.
Yeah.
But like, they said that I guess hugging is hard when you have blades like coming off your shoulders, head, and wrists. But they said she touches
Your head, shoulders, knees, and toes.
They said she touches where he cut his head open earlier, and is like, "What did you do while I was gone, you dumb bitch?" Like, and he's like, "You're 90% of my
That's a nice
impulse
moment.
control,
I like
babe."
that.
Like,
Yeah. They're covered in blades, and they've evolved to have these blades all over their body. And we're told later that's so that they can cut bark off trees. Did they
Okay,
need
whoa, don't spoil it.
this
fucking
many
spoiler
blades
alert, dude.
for...
Well, dude, this is what you're fucking stealing my note from that
Oh,
chapter.
I didn't know
it's like
that.
how many blades do you need?
Their
to
blades
eat
all
bark?
have a very specific purpose.
Oh,
You
come
need an
now.
And none
oyster
of them are
fork,
for
you need
stabbing.
a salad fork, you need
that's a
a
good point.
regular fork.
It's polite
No,
Hork-Bajir
no, it's
society.
not a
A
good
butter
point. A
knife,
fork is a
soup
fork.
spoon.
No, you have
God
the little
damn it.
soup spoon. You have the serving
No,
spoon.
stop it. I didn't grow up in Disney World and I don't need this kind of shaming. I don't know what a
I
fork
bet
is.
you put your fork on the right side of the plate, Chris. The Hork-Bajir would
What
never-
is the right? What are you talking about? Of course I put it on the right side. That's the hand I use.
Where do you put your knife then? You would never be a
I
Hork-Bajir.
put it in my drink to stir it.
Not the spoon.
The spoon goes up my ass
Why?
for moral support.
There was this TikTok I saw recently that was like teaching an AI to write a country song every day, like having it write one every day until it gets one. And it's like flags on truck, boots on knees, or it's like boots on feet. It's like, but it was like flag on truck, boots on feet, gun in ass. But the most consistent thing about the song, it was like it made no sense, but it consistently said guns and butts. Like every time guns came up, butts came up. Like, it was like
That says something about us.
Crazy. I don't even know what we're talking about. I'm sorry. I have a
we're
spoon in my
talking about
ass.
it.
What are
Chapter
we talking about?
13.
Moral support spoon.
Moral support. I'm sorry. You're not going to let me enter the airport because of my emotional support that's currently inserted in my ass.
I thought it was the water bottle. I thought it was the water bottle for sure, but you're telling me it's the spoon on my ass that got me flagged?
I jumped the water bottle. You're telling me this is my I have the documentation for this spoon.
That's
I'm
true.
allowed to take this spoon to work.
Okay, let's get through chapter 13. So there's no hugging.
They talk. Did you say they're pogging?
There's no hugging.
Oh, okay.
Poggers, let's go. Are
you
Let's
pogging?
fucking go. Are you pogging?
So Eddie, you wrote like a treatise on this chapter. Do you want to?
Oh, I
guess
did?
I guess so. The first paragraph
I
is just
need
that
to-
Marco
I
is
do
annoying.
need to pee.
Okay, I'll get another Truly.
Eddie, you wrote a as Miranda was saying, you wrote a treatise on this chapter.
I don't. This is maybe just a good time to jump in. I feel like we already kind of hit on this actually too.
We
Marco's
did.
just kind of he's on one this book.
He's not helpful in any of the discourse. They're like, what are we going to do with him? And he's like, well, I rent him an apartment. People will be confused if they see him at the supermarket. And we all
Yeah.
went, ha, ha, ha. And I'm like, no, you didn't. Because
Yeah.
that wasn't helpful.
Can you find the
Yeah.
comment, Miranda? Because I don't have the book up about he says like, don't start with the ecology stuff, and it's like that's Cassie's. That's 60% of her character.
Cassie says, like, so it starts with Tobias, or Axe saying, those may be the only free Hork-Bajir in all the galaxy, the only two free Hork-Bajir in existence. And Cassie responds, like members of an endangered species. The last two free Hork-Bajir, maybe the last hope of their kind. Oh man, Marco groaned. Cassie, don't start in with the ecology stuff, okay? Those are not a pair of spotted owls or humpback whales back there.
Which is a crazy thing to say, right?
It's a pretty crazy thing to say.
insensitive thing to say.
And Jake,
it makes
Axe says, I can't leave the forest, so that's on y'all. Because they're about to leave. And Jake's like, well, maybe Cassie's right. What do you do with an endangered species? And that's when we get the whole, oh, you take them somewhere safe. And Tobias is like, I am aware of a valley. And they're like, what was that? And he's like, yeah, I'm not sure, actually, but I'll take you to a valley, I guess. That's
Yeah.
what I said. I guess I'll deliver. Like-
Yeah. And just in case we didn't underline that enough, Tobias just has this image flash into his head of this hidden valley. One might call it a hidden valley.
A hidden valley.
a hidden valley ranch. But the thing,
Also, how is a valley hidden? This is pre-Google Maps. I'm sorry, but that's just...
It's like
but there could
it's
be
very
a cute
hard
little
to.
ranch there.
That's true. It's very hard to get into, from what I understand. There's a bouncer at the door, but also this is our.
If you don't have
first-
the hottest clothes on, you're not getting in.
This is our first Adam and Eve parallel that gets drawn explicitly.
I know.
We get Adam and Eve explicitly mentioned.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember way back in book one when they first got their morphing powers, and there was a little bit of like, what do we do with these powers? And Cassie said something sus.
Yeah.
She did.
And was like, we could help save endangered species and all of my. Do you remember
I do. Yeah. In fact, I remember our Animorphs didn't really like our take on it, as I recall.
famously didn't. At the same time, what was Cassie thinking? What is Cassie thinking? What is going on? Like,
No, because she says you find them a safe, protected environment, and then you hope they have lots of little Hork-Bajir, and somehow the species survives. Big somehow.
it's not gonna work.
Big somehow.
It's not gonna work. Yeah, the big somehow, Cassie. It's not gonna work.
If we freed more Hork-Bajir,
Of course.
then
of course.
so it's like
of
they
course.
have little Hork-Bajir children. They have as many as they can, and then we keep working to free more of them to diversify the genetics.
Chris agrees with this. Chris signs on with this categorically. As Chris's lawyer, we agree. And I think that's the best, most generous read we can hope for. But when you start comparing them to Adam and Eve, it starts to get a little weird because, like they say, we all descended from Adam and Eve. That's not possible.
Well, it's a little weird, right? So, big thing, big tradition
I'm just
of
saying,
creation
am I
myths
related
is
to those
hand-wavy.
Hork-Bajir?
You're related to
That's
those
what I want to
Hork-Bajir,
know.
yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
But also, later in the Bible, more people just appear.
Just show up.
So,
They rescued more Hork-Bajir.
Yeah. It's
they
actually
just kind of are
probably
there
the exact
already.
same thing. It's probably they rescued them from the Yeerks. But also, like, every freaking creation myth that I know of off the top of my head involves some form of at least like incestuous thought. Like there's incest in like every creation myth because it's like there were only two gods and they were made by the same people. So they were the brother and sister power gods and then they had babies. And then usually weirdly one of them has to be destroyed into pieces and then they use those pieces to make the earth. It's weirdly prevalent. That one doesn't happen in Christianity. But
People
But
really
yeah,
like to
and-
imagine that we all come from a single source. That's what I think.
well, it's like if everything is like divinely created, then it has to, right? Like
Yeah.
there has to be one moment, even if it spreads out from there with more divinity, there has to be like a moment of creation. And like the Greek mythology is all that way where like everything is descendant from the earth and the sky having babies. Like you are all descendant from like some version of that.
Baby come angels fly around you, and there used to be 3 of us, but now there's only 2. And that's how the world began.
I don't mean
That's
to.
how the world will end.
I don't mean to jump.
It's a Modest Mouse lyric, sorry.
Sounds like one.
I don't mean to jump ahead again. The way that these Hork-Bajir escaped, it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like the Elamists interfered that much. We never know how much the Elamists interfered, but it kind of seems like once the Yeerk popped out, they just ran. Like it seems like they could theoretically rescue other Hork-Bajir, and they wouldn't have to deal with this whole problem of only having.
Yeah, you're right. You're
And
right.
also,
It feels like that, but they failed big time in book 1. So, like, I don't know how true that is. I don't know how much of a moment they really seized upon. You know what I mean? There may have been one moment where because of where they were standing at that exact moment, a guard looked the other way and it worked for 2 Hork-Bajir.
that's true, and they may have just been signaled that was the
Yeah.
moment, and that's when the Elmist was like,
Yeah.
That
"Get
actually
outta there."
explicitly is what happened.
Right, but they
Yeah,
don't really
and, like-
explain what happened that created that window of opportunity. They're just
No,
like, the
and I
Yeerk
don't
popped out,
know-
and then I ran, so...
Right. It's not clear if the Elamist orchestrated a whole situation or just nudged people at a moment when the situation was good.
Which would be his style.
As far as we can tell, what he's doing with Tobias is the most direct action we have ever seen him take. He is physically moving Tobias.
Well, that,
yeah,
when he made
except
everyone
for
watch his
us as
slideshow for
readers.
10 minutes.
Yes,
There was the slideshow, but he
which
wasn't
is
actually,
No, I
he
know,
took
I'm
them
just
into
kidding.
like a sort of like, he froze time to do
Yeah.
that.
But we also know that the
at it.
Andalite Chronicles interact. Look at it.
So beautiful.
Was the Elvis at one point Werner Herzog?
Yeah.
Many books ago? Okay. But what I was going to say was, in the Andalite Chronicles, we did see some pretty remarkable intervention, including reintroduction of Chapman inexplicably in Elfie's world. La 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 la.
Elfie's world. They did seem to imply that he wasn't destroyed, so like the universe just kind of put him back. I almost felt like they didn't say that was that.
Yeah, I think it was Ella Misty though.
But we also know from that there's a dark force at play, and the dark force could have put
which I want to
Chapman
talk
back.
about in a couple chapters because I have some thoughts on that, and it comes up in a couple chapters.
We should keep moving though.
Let's dive
Yes.
back in.
Chapter 14.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically
We're moving as famously slowly as the Anidork be moving. Hey guys, if you want us to stop making this podcast, we're not going to stop.
Support us on Patreon.
Support us on Patreon, and we're going to get you our notes soon enough. Don't you worry.
we're open to bids to get us to stop, but we're not saying we'll take them.
It would have to
It'd
be a
lot.
pretty hefty bid. Like, how much money
Let's not
would
go down
somebody
this
have to... No, because what if somebody did offer us $1 million to stop podcasting? Would that even be enough?
I don't know.
We might have to hit a little more J-Chill
Yeah.
content to get
It
that.
might have to be... okay, 10 million. We could stop.
Or like $1 million
some-
and you can't do a podcast about Animorphs. But you knew podcasts about something else.
No, fuck that. You could stop doing Anidorks and we could start another podcast called Anidorks 2. All right, yeah. If you give us $30 million, we will stop recording this podcast.
So
That is the deal. 30 million. I think that's fair, you guys.
Chapter 14. I think we're done with chapter 13. The kids run off in the night.
I feel done with it.
Tobias and Axe agree to watch over the Hork-Bajir and
Can you
keep
do
tabs
this?
on them.
Can you read this one as Patty LuPone from Sweeney Todd?
No, I can't.
Can you try anyway? Ooh, just do your best, Mrs. Lovett.
Okay.
Miss Lovett, or whatever her name is.
It's just, I don't know how to do it without singing. Tobias keeps watch through the night in a tree near the Hork-Bajir cave. That J is very bad. Please, everybody, kill me about this. This is really bad. He reflects on his life
A reflex.
as a red-tailed hawk. During the day, things are... It's
Dulcet
getting a little
tones.
Australian.
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
They have to
Things
be
are
able to...
pretty good for an hawk. He loves flying under the sun, riding thermals. He appreciates the incredible hawk eyesight. Nighttime for an hawk is a different story. However, hawks are far more vulnerable then. Oh, fuck. I've misread the punctuation. An hawk's eyesight is far less effective in the dark. The threat of an owl striking from the shadows. I tried to put a glottal stop in shadows. In the
I like it.
shadows is
Very
ever
Charlie
present.
XCX.
The fact that Tobias' friends get to sleep in comfy beds in the safety of their homes is never far from his mind during these hours.
All right. So
Can
for
I
this next
stop
one,
now?
Yeah. For this
my
next
Cockney
one,
is apparently really bad.
for this next one, can you do your best Mandy Patinkin?
Axe arrives at Tobias' perch. They discuss the Hork-Bajir they're protecting in the cave. Little more red. Tobias asks why they sometimes
Little more red-tailed.
use English words in their conversations. He just speaks very intensely. It's not a very interesting impression.
He's also he's got this jowl.
Look at that perfect pout, round face,
Look at that perfect
small
pout.
eyes, those DSLs. Axe says that he was taught in school that the Hork-Bajir have a primitive language with only about 500 words, and so the Yeerks must have thought it was important for the Hork-Bajir to learn some English. Tobias noticed that Jarahimi and Ket Halpak kept using the word Kawatnach. What does it mean? Axe doesn't know. He says that he'll ask tomorrow. Tobias jokes that maybe Axe should... A fucking shit dick. Tobias jokes... Fuck you. Tobias jokes that maybe Axe shouldn't. The The Hork-Bajir don't seem to like Andalites. Why should they hate us? Axe asks. We tried to save them, even if we failed. Tobias suggests that maybe they absorbed the Yeerk hatred of Andalites while they were controllers. Axe says that the Yeerks should hate the Andalites. The Andalites will win the war someday. He adds, with the help of the humans, of course. You're my buddy. You're my friend. We're Shorms for life.
Yeah.
Axe is about to continue his patrol when this is long. When Tobias...
You can popcorn anybody you want.
No, that's fine. Axe is about to continue his patrol when Tobias asks if Axe has ever had information just suddenly pop into me head.
Pop into me head.
Is that why you asked for this?
No, I got lucky.
You know me, and I was thinking... Seems a downright shame. Information he couldn't possibly know prior to that moment. Axe is confused and wonders if Tobias is confused. He's about to ask if he's okay. But before they can properly explore the question, it happens to Tobias again. Just like that, he knows the Taxxons are approaching, and they're Taxxons that can track smells like bloodhounds. Axe is uneasy. He knows what Tobias is describing. A special breed of Taxxons called trackers. Very descriptive. But Axe doesn't understand how Tobias could know of Taxxon trackers. The Animorphs have never encountered them. There's no time to discuss. They're going to have to move Jurahami and Kethalpak now before the Taxxons get any closer. Tobias will leave with the Hork-Bajir for the mountains. Axe will have to alert the others. They'll rejoin the party later in their bird morphs. As the chapter closes, Tobias reflects on how he feels like a puppet. And he refuses to be used like this. Tobias is a predator now, a hunter. He vows to confront whoever is manipulating him. It's a big chapter.
There's so much that happens here.
Yeah, and your description captures all of it very beautifully.
My big thing,
No joke.
I have a couple things, right? And, we get the usual, predator prey. I feel like a cool predator during the daytime. I feel kind of helpless at night, although, only owls are really a threat because foxes don't really climb trees, which I'm pretty sure gray foxes can climb trees, but I also don't know where all in the country they live. But he's like, owls could eat me, but he's like, oh, but owls, man, they're silent in the night. It's fucking scary. And then he just wishes he had a bed. A little snug, and as we say, the drawer is always open, Tobias.
Yes,
but
seriously.
The drawer is always open. Can I take you guys on a little tangent?
That's what we need at this point in the podcast.
All right, if you're going to give me that kind of...
No, I'm ready.
No, go ahead.
So Andrew Mason, former CEO of Groupon, thought it would be a good idea for his employees to record an inspirational album about good business practices. And he recorded it and released it on Spotify, and we listened to it at DIY Recording Equipment on repeat. And one of the songs was set to the tune of Rainbow Connection, a song called My Door Is Always Open, as a boss.
How do you set that to Rainbow Connection?
It was actually non-trivial, and he sang through a vocal filter to make him sound like a child so that he could do both parts of the song. It was awful and weird. And but My Drawer Is Always Open this is a deep cut for a lot of people who don't listen to this podcast. Point is, it's a hell of an album. And if you listen to it, you'll get good CEO practices for your next... You know what? I try.
Also, maybe My Drawer Is Always Open would be great for the musical.
Oh, yeah,
It's
no,
probably
100%.
Yeah,
I feel like that went
probably-
without saying.
Yeah. But the whole reason why I thought of this is because Tobias feels like a Muppet in this scenario. And so we have to... That's
Well-
our segue back into the plot.
He says, puppet. He doesn't say, I feel like.
I'm sorry. The McGurk effect is kicking in. I see your lips moving, but I'm left to interpret on my own.
You
I
just
see
Googled
Muppet.
that. I watched you Google that.
No. I know the McGurk
That did
effect
happen
from
earlier
Poker
in the
Face.
podcast.
Stop that. I know the McGurk effect.
I do think if you were the editor, Chris, and you sent back one note about this book, and you're like, I think you meant Muppet.
Hey, we're trying to get the kids interested. Could you mention Muppets here?
They're very big. They're about to have a very big movie. They had a big movie
Big
right around
Bird's
2000.
A very big bird.
A very big bird.
Very big bird.
And most of what I know about Egyptian mythology, that's not entirely true, but a large part comes from a Sesame
Muppets
Street
in the
special.
Museum, Sesame Street in the museum or whatever.
Where
what was that called?
They had a young boy was trapped as a cat forever because his soul was not lighter than a feather, and Big Bird helps him get his soul lighter than a feather, and they meet Anubis so that this child can move on.
Don't eat the pictures. Sesame Street at the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Is that really what it was with the cat?
That is it. Yeah, as the Metropolitan Museum of Art closes, Big Bird decides to leave his Sesame Street friends behind in search of Snuffy. Once locked inside for the night, educational hilarity ensues as Big Bird and Snuffy team up to help the ghost of a small Egyptian boy solve a mysterious riddle. The rest of Sesame Street's residents search for Big Bird.
Gotta be honest, it's pretty depressing that
it's really sad, actually.
Egyptian boy
Think of how long he's been there. Yeah,
and he's haunting the museum because his remains have been moved. Probably.
Stolen. Yeah. Anyway, we're reading Animorphs.
Yes.
And Axe tries to sneak up on Tobias, but he doesn't succeed.
Oh, God, you scared me.
He doesn't succeed, and he's like, you're pretty quiet for, a big four-legged, two-handed, four-eyed, scorpion-tailed alien. And Axe is like, I'm going to get you one of these nights. And Tobias is like, yeah, and eagles might fly out of my butt. And Axe is very alarmed about this possibility. And Tobias tries to explain that it couldn't happen, and that's why it's funny. And Axe, this is, again, I always said that it's like, blah, 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 she lied is one of my favorite type of lines. And so it's like, I understand, X said, clearly not understanding at all.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just love it.
Yeah.
Now, here's I know
X.
we have to keep moving, but what I'll say is, do you think Axe is concerned because Andalite butthole is big enough to serve an eagle?
Well, I don't know if we got Kafit birds coming out of there. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm just saying, because maybe, anyway, all right, back to the book
I will
already
say
in progress.
So when they have this conversation about where Axe sort of fills him in on Taxxon, no, I'm sorry, not Taxxon, Hork-Bajir language and all those things.
Yeah.
I feel like Axe is this close to figuring out that everything he learned might be propaganda, because he's like, I don't know, that's at least what they taught us in school. I guess it's true. And I'm like, no, buddy.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
It's
No, you can tell he's still channeling it, because doesn't he say it with a hint of snobbery is what Tobias
Yeah, that's
Yes.
what Tobias says.
Specifically.
But just a hint, we're getting better. We're getting closer.
Well, so, and also, Axe is just beginning to unpack the Hork-Bajir portion of his education and life experience. So
and he still doesn't know
chunk by
about
chunk.
the genophage. What was it called? The quantum virus.
Yeah.
Which we
Genophage
know
is
about,
Mass
but he
Effect.
does not. Yeah, genophage is from Mass Effect. But he doesn't know about that. So, he still doesn't know. But the other thing I want to hit on is when they talk about tracker taxxons, he calls them a special breed of taxxon.
Taxxons?
And I just want to know, did the Yeerks breed these taxxons? Did they breed for was this is breed, not
I don't even know.
subset,
I don't
not
even
race,
know.
not
Dude, I don't even know how to begin to talk about that whole thing. That is so ridiculous. I'm pretty sure all KA was imagining was a little floppy basset hound or bloodhound Taxxon, which, by the way, was my favorite irreverent band from the early aughts. I hate the Bloodhound Gang, but I needed to make that joke.
It is a crazy thing. Just after we learned about that Taxxons are, I guess they were organized enough, they were sentient enough to have
they were all sort of maybe being psychically controlled by the giant the giant mountain. But
where were you going, Ed?
Yeah, but just imagining the Visor 3 is their new great pink mound or whatever it was called.
It was not a great pink mound. You stop that. It was a red hill.
Eddie wishes. Oh man, I'll tell you what. I'm imagining a fucking Taxxon Dog Show right now with like a Taxxon on a leash and a little human like prancing behind.
Oh my God,
him.
how many judges do you think get eaten at the Taxxon Dog Show?
Oh my God, and they're like checking the Taxxon teeth.
Yes, and they're like, "Oh, this isn't quite breed
yes,
standard,
yes,
but he's
good.
very charming."
I will say, CJ's email came at the right time because something disturbing does happen later in this book. It's like, not our Taxxons. That was not what that's not the Taxxon we were promised.
It's totally true. Like I don't know why Taxxons were so fucking cute.
Well, they're very
In
wiggly.
Andalite Chronicles, very wiggly.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
were little commuters on the train, and they just got in and took their seats and waited
Yeah.
until the monorail got where they were
They had
going.
umbrellas and hats and newspapers.
We may have inferred some of
Yeah.
that. It may not
Yeah.
all have been in the text, but
At least
like,
one of them was there. The thing I was starting to say before I got completely sidetracked was that it is okay. So no, I guess this was your point, Miranda, that they are kind of being psychically controlled. So it makes it a little bit less weird that they've been bred to produce certain traits.
It is so
weird. Yeah.
and that's,
pretty
I was
weird,
making the
dude.
point that it is definitely still weird, but are they saying, like, is Axe not using breed correctly here? Like, were they self-selecting for the trait at home?
No,
like,
I don't. It's like
because this is only
there's a thing.
how flexible is their genome if they've only been if the Yeerks have only been waging this war for 25 years and we've already bred tracker Taxxons?
I'm not even sure you have to go that far though, because like in the British like intelligence agency, they had these people called super recognizers who were just people who were really good at recognizing faces. Like without fail, for whatever reason, they don't know if it was genetic, they don't know if it was training, they have no idea why. But they would run these people through a test and be like, you're a super recognizer, and we're looking for someone who's been missing for 20 years. And
Okay.
then, like, there's stories of these people being out and about, seeing the person, and later being completely right.
So you're saying this could be like some sort of Taxxon aptitude test that they may not have been
Yes.
breeding them
Oh,
specifically for this.
back
Okay.
to
Exactly. Yeah, they're taking their
They
little
get letter
SATs,
grades. Yeah.
filling in the little circles like the circles of their mouths.
Do you think Visser 3 gives them stickers?
Oh!
Okay,
CJ
Taxxon
doesn't know
aptitude
what they're
test. All right,
talking
we've
about.
taken away the creepy.
Taxxon
It's
aptitude
cute.
test is our fucking metal band that we just formed tonight. Eddie, you're on bass. I'm shipping you a bass. Let's fucking go.
Tobias has this moment where he starts thinking about the fact that he's getting pushed around. What leads to this here? That he starts to...
He starts telling Axe, and like, because he got cut off,
Oh, that's right.
they're
yeah.
talking about it, and he's like, yeah, this is what we'll do. And he's like, but then, like, as he's doing his internal narrative about everything, he's like, someone is using me for something, and I do not like it.
Yeah, yeah. He gets to this place internally where he wants to... He says, like, I was the predator, I was the hunter, right? And he...
Yeah, so if you
He's
want
kind
the,
of
if you want me to
reclaiming
give you the
this-
line,
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
agree with the reclaiming language. Yeah, I like that a lot. So it says, heading toward the mountains with a pair of Hork-Bajir while someone or something used me like a sock puppet. Well, that was going to change. I was the predator. I was the hunter. No one was going to use me. And I also use the word of reclaiming where I'm like, because this predator prey narrative was like a big deal for him in book 3 and like dealing with his place in it and
Yeah.
dealing with feeling like being a predator was maybe morally wrong, but also
Yeah.
being prey is like objectively like a terrible way to live. And you had talked a little bit about in your notes about like, and I think we had mentioned before, like his role as prey as a human. He was bullied. He, you know, people didn't care much about him. He was just shuttled around. He didn't have a lot of say in his life. And now he's using predator, which was something that had initially to him when he became a hawk had sort of a negative connotation where he was like really cut up about the fact that he was killing animals to eat them. And it has like a really positive connotation here to him where it's him using that predator role to mean being in control.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I really like
it's
that.
it's his version of adulting.
Yeah, millennials have adulting, Tobias has predatoring.
Yeah.
Ripping open
Predating?
mice.
Predating.
Yeah. Yeah. Which maybe
I'll
will
also
workshop
say-
the language that he's using.
I forget where I had it in my notes, but there is an interesting thing where, like, there's a really nice switch to him having a sense of center and home in his place in this. Like, and it's something that we hit in our notes over and over again, but he is supposed to be at home in this environment. And this disorientation is like an invasion of that place. Like he may not have had a home as a real boy, but like he has certainty here. He has strength in this environment. He has a sense of himself.
Home field advantage, I think, is something that we talked about a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know if we brought it up explicitly this episode, but I think we talked about it.
Yeah, that this book taking place in the woods really puts him on his own turf, kind of in a way that, like, honestly, no other Animorph has truly been.
Yeah.
Because they're always going to Yeerk bases and whatever. And it's like, but he's like, no.
Not to mention,
this is my woods.
And not to mention that the underpinning of the series is second guessing all assumptions about authority and society. Yeah. So it's like, you have a brother living with you at home who's been Yeerked. We've all been there, Miranda.
Yeah, no, yeah.
I'm sorry.
You're preaching to the choir.
But even that Tobias was able to utilize this Swainson hawk, that was because he knows these woods. Only he could have solved that situation in the way that he did, because he had knowledge about that area.
And so it'll come up that Tobias seems to be an important player in everything, and this actually all, like, I didn't get it as much on my first read or even my recent reread. And, like, I'm now noticing with you saying that, like, him being teleported to that field, only he would have had the idea that actually got Cat Halpak out of there.
Oh,
like, he was, like, may have been the only person in the universe that could have actually gotten Cat Halpak out of there, and he did.
It makes me think so much about, like, a golf video game where you're, like, lining up the shot and you're like, well, what if I point it over here and jack up the energy super high and then it bounces off this wall, and you see the video game's projection of it skipping up and over and you're like, yes, hole in one. That's like how I'm imagining the Ellimist view of time and space.
Yeah. Where he can, like, view how things will play out but he does seem to imply that, like, absolutely everything has an element of choice, and so he cannot actually control what choice.
An element of choice.
He cannot control what choice anyone he puts in these situations is actually going to make. He can just make a really good guess.
Just like I can't ask the ball to go in the hole.
Right. You can't just ask it. You got to figure out the math yourself.
It is. I know this is all old stuff with Tobias, but just having a whole book from his perspective again reminds me just how sad his story is. We're talking about, like, what we would call this adulting, but Tobias is like a kid. And we talk about Marco being a parentified
minor,
minor child,
or
parentified adult. When you have a baby as an adult, you become a parentified adult. Oh my God,
I feel so badly for my friends who are parentified adults.
But Tobias has that even more. Like, we don't see him in that situation because we hardly get him as a kid at all in this series. But just, like, how much he was probably taking care of himself, like, through all of that, and then, like, the reason that he doesn't have, like, if any of the other kids got trapped as an animal, like, they would have incentive to turn it back because they would have a family to return to. But just the fact that Tobias doesn't have anyone who's even looking for him is so incredibly sad. And
it's like, what did they say? They just convinced, like, whoever he was living with, they drop, like, a line about, it's like, we told them he went to live with the other one. Like, and they were just like, okay. And nobody followed up ever. Like, it's been 6 months at least. And no one has followed up.
Going to have some questions a decade from now.
Yeah.
It's horrifying.
And there's just, like, a lot of implication there about, like, we kind of have to get, for, like, still it's a YA series, we have to remove Tobias from that situation immediately, because all of the implications about what that life would be like, or just so
right
dark.
or so it's almost it's to the point that it's less dark to turn him into a hawk and have him have like existential crises about his identity as part boy, part hawk. And the sort of merging of those identities as he stops being a boy in the body of a hawk that has the instincts of a hawk, and now has enough lived experience as a hawk that he's like part hawk.
The last note for that is just how cool it is, but also not what I was expecting for Tobias's arc, that it is about him finding not security, but control, like you said, Miranda, and that he's like, no, I'm like, it's helping him deal with the problems he had as a human.
All right, chapter 15. Tobias flees with Jera and Ket. Jera asks where they're going, and Tobias, still frustrated with his circumstances, says he doesn't know. He bitterly says that he's been waiting for the little voice in his head to tell him what to do. Tobias is surprised to learn that Jera understands this mention of a little voice. A voice told him and Ket to flee from the Yeerk pool. The voice also mentioned that it would send a guide to lead the two of them. This pisses Tobias off even more. He tells the Hork-Bajir to stop running. They're not going anywhere until they get some answers. And just like that, Tobias finds himself teleported to a strange blue-green void. In this place, he is not quite hawk, not quite human. A voice greets him, one he recognizes. The Elemist. As soon as Tobias identifies the creature that has been manipulating him, the Elemist appears to him in the form of a bird of prey. Tobias asks why the creature is making him do things that he does. Thank you for highlighting passive aggressively.
I forgot that you could see that.
Tobias asks why the creature is making him do things that he doesn't want to do, and the Elemist claims it hasn't made him do a thing. It has simply put him in a position to help the Hork-Bajir, just as it once put the Animorphs in a position to help the humans. The Elemist makes its typically vague comments, saying that Tobias is a beginning, a point on which the entire timeline may turn. Tobias says that he'll only help the Hork-Bajir if the Elemist gives Tobias what he wants. You know what I want, Tobias says. The Elemist wonders if Tobias even knows what he wants, what he really wants. And then it teleports Tobias back to the forest.
A lot happens here. Obviously, they take off running and that, happens. And the reveal that Jerahami and Ket
I've been trying to take up running this whole year. It was my New Year's resolution.
And if I could have a little voice in my head that told me the perfect moment to run, that would be ideal. But so the reveal that they had the little voice, so the Elemist has now fucked with not just Tobias, but the Hork-Bajir, and that he was so confident his plan would work that he told the Hork-Bajir he was sending a guide.
Yeah, it is remarkable. I mean, we know something about how the Elemist sees things. We know that there's a fourth dimensionalness to it. Whatever battle the Elemist is playing out, the idea of causality and one thing leading to another, it's deeper than what we understand it to be. I think if the Elemist make some weird guarantee about that, they can know something like that. Yeah. That's just bizarre.
Yeah.
His weird sort of not bird, not boy shape is definitely weird.
Yeah.
He has
and when does that arise? Can you set the scene for that? He's in between morphs or something?
So he says, I was no longer a red-tailed hawk, but I was not human either. At least not the way I had once been. I had arms that were wings. I had legs that ended in talons. I had a beak, but it was a mouth too. I know this all sounds crazy. I know it's impossible to really imagine it very well. But somehow I was both a human and a bird and some third thing that was in between the two.
It's just like the covers. like the middle stage.
He
of the
also
cover.
said, he says when he arrives in the space, he says, I look down at my body and somehow, in a way I can't explain, I seem to be seeing through my body too. It was as if I could see everything from every angle at once, like I was seeing myself through a million different eyes.
So I actually don't imagine he's like a half-morphed creature. I imagine he's somehow seeing himself both as a boy and a bird at once.
And also somehow that mixed together. It's like, it's very not tangible. Like, it's not a possible shape.
Yeah.
Oh, and the bird of prey that the Elemist is
a mix
an amalgam
of all different types of birds. Yeah.
a falcon, an eagle, and a hawk. And actually, right after as this hawk flies down to Tobias, the Elemist says something that I could not let up on in my
this
imagination.
is really important.
So Tobias actually says aloud, the Elemist, greeting the Elemist. And the Elemist replies, yes, Tobias, Elemist, or at least an Elemist. And that to me really got my imagination spinning.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't clear, at least in the main series books, that there was this idea of a plurality of Elemists. And with that assertion, it occurred to me for the first time. I don't think this is true. I think in these books, things tend to be delineated by species. We have a good species. We have a bad species, blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying, like, it had never occurred to me that it could be warring factions of Elemists.
It's possible.
That's something that had not occurred to me. And
the
I
Dark
was
Force, you
very
mean.
excited by it. Yes, exactly. Like, people with reciprocal powers or similar redundant powers all sort of being able to tattle on each other about going too far in this. Or it could be that these Elemists are like, we do not meddle in the affairs of, and so they have to hide it. But the other guys are more like Sauron and willing to meddle in the affairs of man or whatever.
So, like, interestingly, Tobias brings up all the crazy shit they've seen, right? And he says, I've seen Yeerks and all their tools, the Taxxons, the Geds, the Hork-Bajir. I've seen Andalites and met the Chi, the androids in human form. I've traveled through time and to the Yeerk pool and into orbit in spaceships. Bringing up the Chi here to me feels like a deliberate, so I've always had this like rogue Elemist theory. That's what I've been pushing, that this is like an Elemist who's trying as hard as he can to do what he can without getting in trouble.
Yo, so, I love
And
this
so
idea.
if there's like a parallel, like, there's a parallel here of the one Chi that they met that wanted to delete their programming that kept them from violence. And so bringing up the Chi here and bringing up the idea of one person in a species trying to do something different than everybody else in that species, at the same time that we're introducing the idea that this is just an Elemist, feels like it could be intentional.
I love that idea. I feel like I can't tell if the books are going to pick up on that. I will say they are Star Trek fans, and there is this character, Q, that we talked about last episode. And Q, who involves himself with the humans and tries to be the person who polices the humans coming into the broader galaxy and meeting all these alien species, eventually gets kicked out of the continuum, or I forget what they're called, but there's some organization of Q that ends up kicking Q out.
Right.
And the idea of a rogue, so this idea of a rogue, like, omnipotent being is known to KA. That happens like middle of Next Generation.
And I feel like he's trying to do just enough that he won't get kicked out. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, because
he's like a tasteful Q.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because he
Yeah.
wants things to go well, and like I almost feel like his vibe to me, if it's the same Elemist from the last time we saw him, which I'm assuming it is.
He does say we meet again.
Oh, he does say that. You're right. So his vibe to me was very like, it feels like all the Elemists want the quote unquote good thing to happen, but are too high and mighty to actually get involved. You know what I mean? Like they become so obsessed with the idea that they're not getting involved that they won't do it. And so I feel like he's acting on a will that he thinks is greater than his own, but he knows he'll get stopped.
It has wild implications that make me uncomfortable and I feel like don't quite add up, so I'm not going to talk about them now. but I'm thinking. You've got me thinking. The other thing is Q and Picard totally fucked, but I'm just going to say
Yeah,
that
everybody
as
knows
an
that.
aside. Everybody knows that. I'm
But
sorry. I'm sorry.
he's also probably the same Ellimist as the one that came and got Elfangor, because it really seems like everything hinges on Tobias's birth, to the point that he undid everything Elfangor did as a human except giving birth to Tobias.
Yeah.
Well,
What do you
Tobias,
think-
he didn't give birth to Tobias, but
What
fathering
do you think the
Tobias.
significance of the first Ellimist vision involving barbecue Tobias? Like, what does that have any significance?
Well, I
Do
wonder.
we know how important Tobias
Yeah,
is?
maybe that is the message he was trying to send, that there's no way this succeeds without Tobias.
That was so terrible.
It was pretty awful.
Yeah.
The big thing here is that the Ellimist comes in his traditional form and kind of gives an offer. Says, well, I don't know if it's even an offer in the way that it was offered to Rachel.
It's not the same kind of offer, I would argue.
It's a different negotiation.
Because he just comes in and says, I haven't made you do anything. You have acted the way you wanted to act when I put you in those situations. And Tobias is actually the one who turns it into a negotiation. The Ellimist doesn't come out and offer anything. Tobias is like, if I'm so important, because what he says is, Tobias, you are a beginning. You are a point on which an entire timeline may turn.
Which was a line said in Andalite Chronicles, right?
Yeah, or something similar, that he was a bright light in the timeline. Elfangor sees it branching out. And he also says there's a chance that this may all fail and everything will be for naught, but who cares? But we have to try. And Tobias is like, all right, you know what? If you want my help, because that's what you're asking for,
right,
then you're going to help me. According to Axe, you can do whatever the hell you want, so you're going to fix my problem. Or he says, I want to get paid for my services, is what he says.
I want remuneration.
Yeah.
Right, yes. And the Ellimist is like, and what do you want, Tobias? And Tobias, not having learned the importance of
Speaking
clear
clearly.
communication, says, you know what I want. You know. And he's all choked up about it. And the Ellimist is like, oh, but do you know what you want? And if you get it, will you still know?
Yeah.
And then he plops him back in the forest. He doesn't even actually technically agree to Tobias's deal. He just plops him back in the forest.
Ends the call. And
Yeah.
he's
It's like, all right, I've got a 9 o'clock. Thank you.
or he just knows it's a mic drop. I feel like part of the reason, I agree, Tobias, especially in a moment this important, Tobias could communicate more clearly. But the fact that he's choked up and the way we see him talk about it in the coming chapters, it is so loaded for him and so painful for him that he can't even bring himself
agree.
to say it.
No,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
And it's
I agree
heartbreaking.
with that.
I don't think it's often that we get someone saying something choked up, with being choked up while they say it in this series.
And as someone who's been alive too long, you do see that in real life. You see someone put in a situation where they can't ascertain what they need. It will happen.
Yeah.
You see that, and it's hard to watch.
I also think about, I've had, a lot of people talk about Tobias as a trans allegory, and I have had trans friends who, I don't know if I want to say tried to go back to living as their quote unquote cis self because they believed it would just be easier to do that. And so I almost feel like you can see something in here where he wants to go back to being able to connect with everybody, and that's something he can't do if he's not human. But this is now an integral part of his identity, and maybe always was, and he just didn't know how to tap into it. You know what I mean? This is a part of him, and he can't be that if he truly goes back. He doesn't want to go back. He doesn't want to detransition, if you will.
I really think you're onto something with that. There's a elegance to without going into spoilers, but what we're getting at is that Tobias leaves ambiguity into the terms of this agreement that he's making with this Ellimist, and
And elements are tricky, so,
Elements are tricky, but what the elements does give in return is a very interesting response. And we'll deal with that next time
on Anidorks.
Can we talk about this a little more?
Absolutely.
So, what?
I want to get, that was just a joke. Yeah, I'm down to talk.
What, and I know we're not going to come to a clear answer for this, but what are some answers that we could come up with for if Tobias could articulate what he wants? What are some answers to that we could imagine?
That's so hard to imagine. I mean, I feel like every response comes loaded with assumptions.
Yeah.
So if we're going back to being Tobias as a boy, going back to Tobias as a boy means sacrificing his agency to whoever his guardians were.
Yeah.
So it's sort of the emancipation of himself over that situation. We can't go back to that despite him wanting to cede some control and agency and be back in a situation that he's more familiar with. That's part of it. He's crossed that threshold. He can't come home that way. And there's no home for him there.
The heartbreaking thing is a want that he would have to become human again would also have to solve all of those problems that came with being. There's no way that he wants to return to those circumstances that he was living in. Exactly. He would be wanting a family. He would be wanting a stable home like his friends have.
He doesn't want to, like I said, he doesn't want to go back to what he was before this happened. He doesn't want to go back to that life. He doesn't want to be the Tobias that existed before all these things happened to him. What it really feels like he wants is the ability to connect with his friends as humans again.
He wants to be able to go see Rachel get an award.
To get a reward, yeah. That seems to be the only piece to me that he has strongly said he's missing is sleeping in a bed and being able to bond with his friends and also take responsibility and not be stuck as a bird. You know what I mean? He wants to be able to, so he wants the ability to morph again so that he can help his friends.
He wants a home. We know that. Yeah. And that's what you're saying, Miranda.
He's got a found family and his friends now, I feel like. Yeah. And there's no feasible way for him to get to live that life with his friends if he comes back as Tobias.
Yeah, there's also a bizarre lostness to his origin story, too. It's something I hadn't considered because, in the initial book, he was sort of tossed off as and I'm not saying that the series tossed him off. Obviously, they had grand designs for how to tell this story. I'm saying we were asked not to think about where he came from in the beginnings of the book and that it was merely tragic. And something that's even more tragic is how he's just on a rocket trajectory from where he came from. He's just he was Elfangor's kid. He was ripped from Elfangor and thrown back by the Elemist and thrown back into this world. And his beef is essentially with the Elemist. He
doesn't know that
separation from his parents. The tension is just incredible. And literally the only answer he's been given is to be a savior by virtue of being so alone. It's insane.
Yeah.
He's just rocketing away from everything familiar.
It's so true. I hadn't really held that this is the same Elemist who... Now, we don't know. We don't actually know.
We don't know that for sure.
But
Elemist, not the
Elemist. It seems to be It seems to be the Elemist from Elfangor's story. That's my assumption, but we don't know that for sure. But if it is...
Yeah.
That's so... this is also the being that's separated...
He's responsible for everything that's happened to him. And Tobias has no idea about that. And even having no idea about that, he has decided to, in the face of everything he's faced throughout his life, to totally attack the power structure that's in place.
Yep.
And be like, you need me a lot more than I need you. There's a million ways I could die out here without you, sure. But you're not you're not here telling me you're going to save my life. You're out here asking me to do something for you. Mm-hmm. And so you need me more than I need you, and that's going to come with a price tag. That's not something, I'm not just out here to do whatever you want because you can teleport me to a different field. And so the fact that he is engaging with this and A, very lefty vibes, and like workers' rights and things like that. But B, like literally every authority figure in his life has failed him. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there's a part of him that even feels like the Ellimist failed him because he showed that he had the power to put him back in his human body back in book 7, and he didn't do it.
Mm-hmm. Made that horrible moment where Tobias was trying to flap his human arms.
And if you're going to come here and you're going to claim you're not involved, but you're willing to do all this, you're going to get a little bit more involved now.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to do something for me.
The Ellimist is using Tobias, and it is another authority figure who really doesn't seem capable. Like, it's so sad that this being is so powerful, and yet it seems to have a failure of imagination in terms of, like, actually caring for Tobias when everyone else has failed.
Yeah.
And yet, does Tobias
really good point.
Tobias know what he wants? We don't actually know the answer to that question, and the Ellimist can maybe see into his brain. So whether he ends up doing a genie-type trick and sort of technically fulfilling what he said he would do, what he said he would do is what Tobias wants. And whether or not Tobias knows what that is a different matter.
I'll say 2 things to that point. One that just has been hitting me a lot lately about adulthood in general, which is like you get so caught up on your perceived implementations of things and how things are going to look. And like an acceptance of what things are looking like is a very powerful thing.
True, very true.
And Tobias is put in a crunchier spot than I'll ever be in. But it's just, it is a really interesting thing how it's like, that kid energy of wanting to go in a specific direction because that's what they know to be the thing that they want versus like, oh, but I'm so sorry. Like the world just kind of sucks.
Yeah.
And it's just going to continue sucking. And don't worry, you're going to have good times, but the world will continue sucking. And actually, this might be more you than you realize. And you'll figure it out someday and this and the other thing. And then the other thing that I wanted to say was just that, like, this book, I have a strong feeling, and it's a gift from Reddit, really, and all of our great fans who told us to read Andalite Chronicles when we did.
Yeah.
But, like, my God, this is the gun that was loaded in Andalite Chronicles. You know, it just, like, wonderful to have a book that was off the beaten path. It was technically a side quest. Just load the emotional energy of Tobias's journey so nicely. And it just, man, this book is hitting so good.
This book,
it's so good.
It's really good.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It really is incredible. It's just, it took 13 books, 3 Andalite Chronicles books, and 1 Megamorphs to get here, you know?
And it's been fun, and it's been fun the whole way.
The whole time.
Yeah.
And there have been other moments that I've been like, this is clearly when the series grows up and takes off.
Right.
And then it grows up again. Like,
And
just
all the
levels
while,
up.
we have one-dimensional sexist alpha male, like a red pill Marco making jokes
in this
the whole
book
damn
specifically,
time.
it's kind of wild.
He was our
but
star
I feel
child, but
there's so much else going on in this book that's probably a lot of why the other characters all feel like it's like we don't have time. Like
We don't have time.
what do we hear about Jake in this book? I feel like we barely hear about Jake in this book.
Who cares about Jake in this book?
But also, Jake, it makes me appreciate so much more what Jake did at the beginning of the series for Tobias. Even when he just made that little drawer bed, it's so sad
and,
to
was
think no one else
food, off his plate to bring to Tobias. He was trying.
I was thinking about that just now because, like, in the sort of trans allegory, there was this like simultaneous making space for who Tobias was becoming, but like also some kind of it was like the way that Jake knew how to support him.
Right, because he wasn't giving him
enough.
the food he needed to eat, and he was giving him a bed, which is what his human self wanted, but his bird body couldn't use. But it was still definitely well-intentioned, and like...
And also, it's It makes me think of Marco. Like, we're being really hard on Marco this book, and I do think Marco's really annoying this book. But Marco is probably in the closest thing to the same circumstances that Tobias is, and it's really hard to blame Marco for not being... Because I'm like, why can't Marco see how much Tobias needs, and why can't he give him something, and why can't they connect on this, whatever similarities there are in their circumstances?
Yeah.
But also, Marco's got so much on his plate, and he is the other parentified child. Like...
and he's not just parentified in the way Tobias was, where he had to take care of himself. He was parentified in a way where, for a while there, he was taking care of his dad.
His dad, yeah.
And the mom's death is so much more recent.
Yeah, and there was a world where if his dad didn't get a job again, I mean, they'd already had to sell their house and move into an apartment.
Yeah.
Like, there was a world where, like, who knows what Marco would have had to do to make sure that they could survive.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bleak world.
It's a really bleak world, but I'm like, we saw him saving...
we have questions
We saw
for
him
you.
saving an old man as a gorilla, but he might have started mugging people as a gorilla if things had gone too much farther, you know?
And you know what? That same old man was not grateful.
He wasn't!
He said, you're a monster.
Yeah.
He did!
He said, you should have let them mug me. That was capitalism. That was the invisible hand of the market doing its will.
Thanks for listening to Anidorks. We'll be back soon with lots more to say. Until the Andalites return, or at least until next time. See you soon!